Welcome back, everyone, to the Phenomenal Wrestling Podcast with your hosts, Matt and Ryan. Now, in case anyone out there was worried, the podcast is not dead. We ourselves are not dead. And no, we did not get trapped on a deserted island for a month. Frankly, though, everything else that could have happened did happen. I went to California for 2 weeks, and as soon as I got back, Ryan was moving to a new place. But we're all nice and settled and ready to get back into the world of wrestling. Isn't that right, Ryan?
Oh, yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
So much to talk about because we missed so much time. We're gonna change up the format of the show a bit just so we can do one big recap of everything that we missed while we were gone, leading up to the All Out PPV, which will be getting its own episode after this one. So let's not waste any more time than we already have and jump right into the first topic. First of all, we're going to talk about NXT. NXT is dead! No, not really, but they have released back before we left, right when we were leaving, in fact, they had released 13 more people, and the word was that the show is getting a new direction. We've learned a little bit more of the new direction. We got the rainbow logo and all that, but yeah, I mean, they released Bobby Fish, Bronson Reed, Mercedes Martinez, Tyler Rust, Kona Reeves, Leon Ruff, Stefan Smith, Jake Atlas, Ari Sterling, Desmond Troy, Zachariah Smith, Asher Hale, and Giant Zangier. Now, not every one of those people were big names at NXT, but the ones that stood out to me was obviously Jake Atlas. From what I understood, the guy was one of the hot new stars on the indie circuit, and he and Jungle Boy had some pretty good matches back when they were not signed with the big companies. When it came time to join the big leagues, though, Jungle Boy went to AEW, while Atlas went with WWE. Now, according to Dave Meltzer, it was always his dream to go to WWE, which is why he took that job, and it's just too perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm shocked by it. I haven't seen many Jake Atlas matches, I'll be honest, but it just, a lot of these releases, like Bronson Reed was just North American champion.
Yeah.
Like, not too long ago. And Bobby Fish was part of a very successful stable, and, you know, it's just, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're going purely developmental now, and they're dropping kind of the NXT as third brand kind of thing.
I'm sure USA is happy about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were promoting it. I saw plenty of commercials for NXT, you know, at least when I was watching Raw. I mean, obviously that'll happen. But, yeah, it's just, it's a few of those names were definitely shocking. I mean, I get, you know, kind of trimming the roster and making way for new people, but, I mean, releasing people who, you know, have been mainstays for the past year at least is pretty shocking.
And even people who just got on board. I mean,
Yeah.
You've got the story of these two guys, Jungle Boy and Jake Atlas, both young and ready to light the world on fire, and both taking diverging paths at the same time. Jungle Boy, for all accounts, was the greener of the two back when they were on the indie circuit. He went to AEW, that nurtured his skills, put him in a killer act with Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt, and in such a short amount of time has become one of the biggest names in wrestling. Then you've got Jake Atlas, who, went to developmental to learn what he already knew, and then got his butt kicked on NXT for a few months before being unceremoniously dropped by the company? It's especially funny with what happened next as word started to trickle out what kind of changes WWE wanted to make to NXT. The gist seems to be that WWE no longer wants NXT to be the third brand and instead are sending it back to its roots, or at least some rose-tinted version of that. I remember the original NXT having stuff like kissing contests and promos about mustaches, which hopefully WWE knows better than to go back to. But to paraphrase a quote here, no more short people, no more starting in their 30s, and they want people that can be box office attractions and main characters. Vince, Pritchard, anyone else at WWE who makes decisions. No one has cared about height in 20 years. Every time they try to push this big men in wrestling nonsense, it just feels forced and makes them look completely out of touch. Who cares if Jake Atlas is only 5'7"? He's great at what he does, and he has everything you supposedly want now. He's a superstar in the making, and WWE squandered him like they have plenty of others. And the fact that they can no longer guarantee their own contracts, what is it that could make you want to go there if you have the option to go anywhere else? Now, I've heard some argue that even if they don't keep you, they don't end up keeping up your end of the contract, it's still worth going for whatever money you get until then. But that's really only something that applies to big name stars. Lower and mid tier guys aren't going to get the kind of money that everyone else is. And if you're not a big name, then you could easily miss the boat by going to WWE and wasting your time there. I think Atlas is popular enough that he'll end up somewhere before long. I haven't heard anything yet, but I could have just had my head in the stand the whole time. I don't know if he's showing up anywhere. But it's just getting harder and harder with each new story from WWE to not think the worst of them. This is where it always goes. You either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Or in this case, WWE, you either keep the territory system alive or destroy all the competition like some ultra-capitalist version of Highlander. That's it. That's all I got to say. What do you think about all this, about NXT, and what have they done in the last few weeks to kind of... Have they done anything to alleviate these concerns that this release has caused?
You mean that new logo didn't solve everything?
No, it hasn't.
I mean, like, I think you could just look at the Adam Cole situation, where
WWE he's a
was
guy
kind of
who
surprised that his contract was expiring.
Yeah.
Like, it came as a shock to some people in WWE. So I really have no faith, and who knows how much of it is Vince or Bruce Pritchard, how much has been, power has been wrested away from Triple H, in terms, because NXT is his baby. I mean, I think that's been made clear at this point. It's probably somewhere in the middle. I'm sure Triple H isn't blameless. I'm sure Vince isn't the only person to blame, but it's just a failure from an organizational standpoint that, there's no clear direction for NXT. Maybe they're trying to do that with this new logo, this new developmental standpoint, but who knows if it's going to work, and who knows if they're actually going to stick to their guns and do what they say they're going to do.
I mean, even, 3 years ago, NXT was considered the best American wrestling that you could see. It had all the great talent on there, and, it was like the cool kids wrestling, if that's an okay way of putting it. And in just, I don't know, this war just kind of warped their minds on all this. They lost... In trying to beat AEW in the worst way possible, they've destroyed the best thing that they had going for them.
Oh, for sure. And I think they might have been kind of shocked by the fact that NXT didn't just outright beat AEW, and they might have taken that as a massive, massive failure and just changed directions completely. I mean, I think moving back to Tuesdays was kind of a retreat for them. I mean, I don't think I'm, saying anything new there, but it kind of felt like a failure from their standpoint. They kind of blinked first. And I don't think Vince likes doing that. So I think that has a ton to do with it. And I think good wrestling isn't enough for Vince McMahon, which is wild to say about the person who runs, the biggest wrestling company in the world.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And to quickly go back to the Adam Cole thing, that's an example of what I was talking about. Adam Cole, if he had stuck with WWE and they fired him in 3 months, did you think AEW would miss the boat on him, would just say, nah, we don't want you anymore? No, they would have gotten him in right away. The other 12 people on this list, some of them probably are at that level. Maybe even Bobby Fish may not be at his level, but he's probably close to it. And you got Jake Atlas, who everyone was high on when he was in the indies. But I'm sure like the other 11 or 10 people on that list, there's less of a chance for them to land after getting fired like this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there are, like you said, a handful of people on that list who will be fine regardless, are known commodities in the industry. But it really stinks for the people who are just kind of cutting their teeth or were still pretty green, because they'll need someone to give them a shot to really prove themselves. I mean, Adam Cole is going to be fine regardless. He's proven himself in Ring of Honor. He's proven himself in New Japan. So he'll be fine regardless. But some of the other names on the list, I mean, they're really going to have to rely on tryouts or people, dark matches or people just giving them shots. It stinks when, again, WWE lets people go, especially seemingly out of nowhere, right? Especially people who it seems like they had a plan for, at least for a while. They gave titles to, whatever. But hopefully, the wrestling ecosystem is such that they'll land on their feet somewhere, or at least be given a shot somewhere.
Yeah, the best of luck to everyone who is released by NXT. And now we go ahead and move on to our next topic. Oh, look! Yeah, probably not the best look for WWE when 2 of the stars they released a few weeks ago show up on the competition the same week you release even more talent. We are talking about 2.0 and Daniel Garcia. Not only that, but those two got over in 3 matches where they were languishing in NXT for years? Matt Lee and Jeff Parker, the former Ever-Rise from NXT, now going by 2.0 at AEW, and they've been teaming up with Daniel Garcia to put on some fantastic matches in the few weeks before the pay-per-view. The trio started off strong with a solid match against Eddie Kingston, Jon Moxley, and Darby Allin on the August 4th show, where Darby gives one of the most devastating suicide dives I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Matt Lee is fawning over Sting, who's outside the ring, when out of nowhere, Darby comes jumping through the ropes like a cannonball. That was amazing. What did you think of that match? And that spot in particular, I love that spot. What did you think of that?
I mean, anytime Darby does that cannonball dive out of the ring is I pop for that. That's a great spot. But yeah, I mean 2.0, like I said, I haven't seen too much of them in NXT or anything. But they really just launched them into a pretty great feud, a few different feuds, honestly, with some top guys. So it's really cool to see them kind of again get their footing in matches against Darby Allin and Sting, for example, is pretty cool.
Yeah, and they paired him up with a really great new talent. We had Daniel Garcia going one-on-one against Darby Allin, where this kid really got to show what he could do, even if he ultimately lost to Darby in that match. 2.0 tried to run in and beat up Darby after the bell, but they immediately realized how bad an idea that was, and Matt Lee eats a suplex from Sting before Jeff Parker eats a nut shot and right hook from the Icon. And then we had Darby Allin and Sting versus 2.0 on the August 18th show, which was a heck of a lot of fun as well. There's this one brutal spot where 2.0 lift Darby up and drive him in the top part of an entranceway.
Oh, yes.
I googled it, and I think that thing is called a jamb.
Okay, like JAMB?
Yeah. Like, that's the word for, like, the top part of a door or something. So I think...
Gotcha,
yeah.
okay.
They knocked him into the jam. But then they ultimately lose when Sting gives both of them Scorpion Death Drops at the same time, and then a Scorpion Death Locks when they both tap out. He's doing like these super moves on both of them at the same time. And I mean, they're losing, and they're doing it in a comical way, but the crowd is still behind them. They're still getting over, and they're still getting these really good matches, where in NXT, maybe they get one every once in a while, and then they get pushed to the back.
Yeah, and I mean that match specifically, I'm usually not a big fan of when matches go into the crowd or backstage or anything, but they were creative about it, and it's just the cool way AEW just kind of does little twists on things that you've seen before. So yeah, 2.0. I mean, they're giving 2.0 space to grow and space to breathe and space to kind of explore what their characters can be, which is what I think they're doing way better than any company in the U.S. at this point.
And there was at least one more big match that they had before the pay-per-view, but we're not going to get into that. We're going to get that into another topic later in the episode. But yeah, I shouldn't be this surprised that AEW knows what they are doing, but it astounds me how quickly these three guys got over. 2.0 are a great comedy act, and they are solid in the ring. And in just a few matches, Garcia looks like he could be the next big star at AEW. I could see him working programs with the younger guys like Darby and Sammy, and I can't even imagine how WWE would have screwed up such a sure thing, except that I know for a fact that they would have. So yeah, I am so glad that we have such a perfect example of WWE dropping the ball once again on some fantastic talents, them showing up at AEW, not only killing it, but also lifting the company up while they're doing so, bringing in a new talent to be lifted up as well. It's amazing how well that company has been putting this kind of stuff together, where NXT is just struggling to attain any sort of relevancy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you said you can imagine that WWE would screw this up. They did already. They fired these guys. Yeah. So it's like...
Well, even Daniel Garcia, like, he's got a great look to him, but...
Oh, sure.
They wouldn't have done anything with him.
No, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's clear the direction that WWE wants to go. They no more quote-unquote small guys, no more quote-unquote...
He's not the biggest guy in the world.
People in their 30s. Yeah, so it's clear the direction that WWE wants to go, and it's clear that AEW is focused on, hey, can you wrestle? Do you have a character that we can develop? And how can we put you in a story that utilizes your strengths and minimizes your weaknesses? And I think they're so far so good for them.
I think that's enough WWE bashing for the moment, so we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the Labors of Jericho. Where we last left off, Jericho had beaten Nick Gage in a hellacious match that got them in trouble with Domino's, though it looks like that controversy blew over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so after that, he faced Juventud Guerrera, where the stipulation was that for Jericho to win, he must land a move from the top rope. Not everyone has enjoyed the whole Labors of Jericho thing, and for me, this might be the match that pushed things a little bit too far for me. It's by no means a fault of the two guys in the ring, as they are great here, and I have to find out what Juvi does to look so young. Yeah. I mean, like, you look at a picture of him now, and it's like, and they tell you how old he is, and it's like, lies!
Yeah.
No, cannot be. That's got to be his son. That's got to be a nephew. That's got to be a clone of him.
Right.
But it can't actually still be Juvi at this point. But to get back to the match, the stipulation doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's also not very well explained. I honestly thought that all that had to be done was to land one move from the top rope to win, and the rules of that weren't clear until we saw how it played out in the match. Apparently he has to land a move from the top rope and then either pin or submit him. The latter of which, by the way, was a pretty goofy looking spot where Jericho drops from the top rope onto Hoovy and just kind of puts him in the walls of Jericho somehow. Hoovy eventually gets out of it, and they go back and forth for a bit, with Hoovy getting closer near falls and landing a Hoovy driver, but then Jericho hits the Judas effect and Hoovy is down. However, he landed it while on the ground and can't cover him, to which Jericho looks right at the camera with a dumbfounded expression on his face before going on the top rope, landing a flying Judas effect to finally get the pin and win the match. I'd honestly would have much preferred a simpler match between these two, or perhaps a more straightforward stipulation, as the top rope stuff kind of dragged things down throughout. But it was nice to see Hoovy again. What did you think about all this?
Yeah, I thought it was a decent enough match. It was cool to see Hoovy. You know, they obviously had a bunch of matches in WCW, and I think, like you said, the stipulation was kind of confusing, where it wasn't super clear. Okay, do you have to hit your finishing move? Like, it has to be the winning move from the top, you know, so it wasn't super clear. I don't know whose, you know, kind of responsibility that is between the announcers or even MJF the first time he announced it. But yeah, there were some clumsy spots for sure. I thought, to their credit, the top rope Judas effect looked pretty decent, but it was just nice to see, hey, in 2021 we got a Jericho versus Juventud match, and kind of the novelty of it, I think, carried me through it.
It's like going back to the 90s.
Yeah, truly.
After the match, Jericho is attacked by a rampaging Wardlow to set up the next match where he will face him, and the stipulation is that MJF will be at ringside. It was kind of hinted that it might be that he's the referee, which would have been fun, but instead he was just at ringside. Wardlow's strength coupled with Jericho's exhaustion means that it was mostly heat, as Jericho got one codebreaker at the start and then eats offense from Wardlow for several minutes uninterrupted. Powerbomb after powerbomb, suplex after suplex, just no mercy for Jericho as he barely manages to hold on and continues to look for his chance. His time comes when Wardlow puts Jericho on the top turnbuckle for the casualty of war, as they call it, but he plays to the crowd, which creates an opening for Jericho to drop down, knock him on his back, and put him in the walls of Jericho. Wardlow isn't looking too good, so MJF rakes Jericho's eyes behind Ref Aubrey's back and breaks up the hold. A victory that is short-lived because MJF then tries to run into the ring with his Dynamite Diamond ring and is caught immediately. MJF is ejected, Wardlow is incensed, and while Ref Aubrey is dealing with this, Jericho grabs Floyd the Bat and bashes Wardlow across the face and hits the Judas effect just in time for the ref to turn around and count the pin, winning the match and finishing his fourth labor. It certainly wasn't the best of labors, but it definitely made Wardlow look like a total beast throughout.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. They did a good job of making Wardlow look like a monster, which I think they've been doing a good job of in general. Wardlow kind of scares me in a good way. He's just a big, beefy guy. He's, you know, kind of the same way that Brian Cage kind of scares me, but I think even more so than Brian Cage. I think they do a good job of building him up to be an absolute monster. And Jericho, props to Jericho for just, during every labor, really, but really just doing the work in this match. I mean, just absolutely taking a beating, making the other guy look good until the very end, where he needs the win to advance the story. So I think all around, this was played very well.
There's something about Brian Cage where he looks a little bit adorable, where Wardlow just looks mean.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I don't know what it is with Brian Cage. I think he's just so cartoonishly big that he just looks like, I don't know, like a caricature of a muscular man. I don't know.
When is he gonna get his action figure?
I don't know. I think it's coming. It's got to be coming soon. I mean, he's the ideal action figure. He essentially is one already.
You just need to recast a He-Man action figure.
Yeah, exactly, and then you're set. So I don't know. One of these next few lines, he'll get in.
Well, to get back to the Labors of Jericho, so post-match, MJF is not a man to go into something like this without a backup plan, and sure enough, Shawn Spears runs in and pounds on Jericho to try and soften him up even more before his inevitable match with MJF. Sammy Guevara runs in to try and break it up, but Wardlow is back up at that point, and the two of them overwhelm Sammy, while MJF locks in the salt of the earth on Jericho, who tries to tap out to the indifference of MJF. What a bastard. Hagar eventually runs down to clear the ring, but the damage is already done, and MJF has one more trick up his sleeve. Jericho may have finally gotten his rematch, but MJF still chooses the stipulations, and for the final labor, he will not only be barred from using the Judas effect during the match, he can't even come out to the song Judas. The nerve of it.
The nerve. Absolute nerve.
Even more surprising than those stipulations, though, is the fact that they gave the match away for free on TV instead of holding it off for the pay-per-view. Though they do end up having a match on the pay-per-view anyway, so it's kind of a moot point now. But I can also see why this particular match wasn't going to be on the pay-per-view. It's still a good match, but I wouldn't call it a pay-per-view quality one, nor is it the kind of match that gets people pumped to see what's next, given the way that it ends. It starts off well enough with Jericho coming out to the crowd singing his theme song without the music playing, which it makes MJF get this very peeved look on his face. And on top of that, Jericho remains dominant for the opening few minutes of the match. MJF is such a perfect heel because his selling is top notch whenever he needs to make something look painful. He eats a springboard drop kick like a champ. I love it when he eats that kind of move. But he's also legitimate enough that you can buy it when he kicks out of big moves or manages to make a comeback. What it ends up coming down to, though, is a battle of submissions, as MJF locks in the salt of the earth on Jericho's bad arm, but he rolls out and puts him in the walls of Jericho. However, MJF quickly manages to roll out of it and kicks Jericho away. They slug it out for a bit before MJF puts Jericho in the walls of Jericho himself. The nerve again.
That's right.
How could he? But his inexperience with the move shows as Jericho makes it to the ropes to break it, to break the hold. MJF goes for the Dynamite Diamond ring to finish Jericho for good, but he's caught by Ref Aubrey, who takes the ring and throws it away. While this is happening, however, Jericho manages to hit him with Floyd the Bat and almost goes for the Judas effect before catching himself and stopping halfway through, wanting to make sure he doesn't trip over the stipulation there. Using this moment's uncertainty, MJF boots him, locks in the salt of the earth again, and actually manages to submit Jericho. MJF, through his nonsensical challenges, proves himself that he was the better man. He ended up not being able to use the Dynamite Diamond ring while Jericho hit him with a bat. Even if there was a moment's hesitation for Jericho, who had to stop himself from using the Judas effect, MJF recovered quickly enough to take advantage of that and crank in the salt of the earth. So, I mean, in the end, it's Jericho loses about as clean as this kind of match can be because Jericho probably has more heel points, cheating points at the end of this than MJF does, and he still manages to tap out Jericho. So what did you think when you first saw this match? Did you think it was a good idea that they didn't save this ending for the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I do. And, I don't know if it's the benefit of hindsight. I mean, we're talking about this a little bit after All Out, so we know what happened. But I think it did kind of raise the stakes and make things desperate for Jericho, at least the outcome of this fifth labor. And it also makes MJF look smart. I mean, he looks like a smart heel. He put Jericho through all of this. He set him up, to fail, and Jericho failed. So it makes both guys' motivations make sense. Jericho desperately wants to prove himself that he can still go, and MJF is setting Jericho up for failure, a guy he hates a lot. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and it set up kind of a very desperate match for the pay-per-view.
Right. And yeah, as we said, this does eventually lead to a pay-per-view match. We didn't know this when they initially did the final labor of Jericho.
Right.
So it was just, oh no, Jericho lost at the end of that. And my concern is kind of what you were getting at, that Jericho was so... This is a babyface thing that really annoys me, where a babyface is so willing to play into the heel's hands because it's some way honorable or something like that. But in wrestling, honor just means that someone else gets to take advantage of you.
Right. And it's happened a few times in AEW.
Yeah, I mean, even the Cody thing where he let MJF whip him, he took it like a champ, and there was some really good stuff, like MJF realizing that it wasn't going to stop him. But still, come on, man. Did you need to do that? Right. Wow, I guess he doesn't want to fight me. I guess he's a big wussy. I'll just come out every week and just call him a wussy. Instead of going for his ridiculous sadomasochistic nonsense. And I was worried after this match that Jericho would have one giant pity party on the next AEW. Doesn't exactly work out that way. He's just basically he's obsessed, but he's not throwing a pity party for himself. He wants one more match with Jericho, and MJF doesn't want to do it again, but to sweeten the deal, he says that Jericho says that he will retire if he loses the match. And, retirement stipulations don't work for me, as the stakes involved end up overshadowing whether the match is good or not. Instead of considering how the match will play out, I'm focused on the outcome only. And maybe for others, it's not so overwhelming of a stipulation, but it's just not my cup of tea. And for what it's worth, I think this all but guaranteed that Jericho was going to win. We saw how it played out at the pay-per-view, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But what do you think about these kinds of high stakes in matches?
I mean, for the most part, I do agree in terms of like, okay, if this is a loser leaves town match, that's the trope of this. Do you just focus on the near falls and kind of not focus on the wrestling as much? But I will say this one worked for me solely because at this point in time, Jericho has done at this point this is 2 years of AEW officially.
Right.
He's done a lot for AEW. He was the first world champion. He created a stable and has been pushing a lot of young people. He's already on the commentary team for Rampage. I could buy that this could be the end for Jericho, at least until some other thing brings him out of retirement. So in this case, it kind of worked for me, but I do agree that it can sometimes overshadow the actual match, and you just kind of worry, okay, was that a 3 count? Kind of focusing on the near falls or how many near falls there are, as opposed to the builds up to those falls, right? So I do get what you're saying. I think in this case, I could almost buy Jericho retiring. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to retire eventually, but I just didn't think...
Yeah.
He's got the cruise in 8 months. He's not going to be there not wrestling, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
And that's the kind of things that go through my head when someone throws out a retirement stipulation. The guy's got another year or 2 on his contract. They're not going to pay him to stay at home or just to do commentary. And that takes me out of it more than it probably should, but that's what happens when you say that kind of stipulation.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. I totally forgot about the cruise thing.
That'd be a fun cruise. Hey, let's go on the Jericho cruise. He's not going to wrestle, and he's just going to be kind of sad.
He's ringing the bell or something, yeah.
Well, Jericho wasn't the only one who had a rough few weeks, as our next topic is Malakai Black, and we're starting with Cody's match against him, with his supposed retirement at the end of it. So the match took place on the August 4th episode of Dynamite in the main event, and Cody is nothing if not a consummate showman, and he definitely gave everyone something to talk about. The match itself is almost immaterial to what happened afterwards, but it's worth noting that this is a darn good match. Black starts off strong and more or less finishes the match within the first few seconds with a well-timed kick to Cody's leg that pretty much shuts down his offensive capabilities. He's clutching it the entire time, trying to hop around, but Black is still at 100% and not above cheating his way to victory, such as when he thumbs him right in the eye. There's also this one cool spot, which is also a little bit corny, where Black sees Cody going up to the top turnbuckle, and he lands a jump kick right to the leg. Now, instead of falling into the ring, Cody falls backwards and smashes into the timekeeper's table on the floor below. A very impressive spot to be sure, but I'm not sure why he fell down in that direction instead of the more obvious and safe one. Did you find that spot kind of odd? Like a little played, showy?
It definitely was like a kind of a juiced up spot, where that like... It took me out of it a little bit, where I was like, "Okay, Cody, you were aiming for that
exactly.
table. I don't know if you thought, I don't know if you thought that would break your fall or something, but it definitely was like, oh, that's a wrestling moment,
Well, if the leg injury wasn't enough, the table spot certainly sealed the deal, as Malakai Black gives him a swift spin kick to the jaw to knock him out and get the pin. Good stuff, but the match barely goes 5 minutes before it's over, and now Cody's got to fill the rest of the remaining time by himself. He certainly spends it well, I guess, as he gives his retirement speech and starts to undo his boots when Black comes back and bashes him in the back with a crutch as the show goes off the air. Now, it's pretty clear that this was, Cody's chance to get off the show so he can do another season of the Go Big Show. I don't think any of us were expecting him to take this, make this retirement angle, which, we know now it's not. He has a match against Malakai Black at the Arthur Ashe Stadium show. But, he does break kayfabe and gives something of a shoot promo about his career, and the fact that he went as far as to starting to take his boots off, means that he wanted us to take it serious in that moment. And, the guy did have a kid, so perhaps he did want to leave the ring with his body still intact, which is understandable. But the fact that Black bothered to come back and bash him with a crutch, it was a clear indication that this is probably not the end of it. But yeah, when Cody was giving that speech, taking off his boots, did you think it was real or legitimate?
No.
Okay.
But I did I did love everything about this. I mean, I think the crowd, a lot of the crowd bought it, and I think that's huge. I mean, when people are shouting no as you're giving a speech, I think that's a good sign that what you're doing is working. So, personally, I think there's so much more story to tell between these two, that this was just kind of another piece of it. But he performed it. I mean, he really gave it his all in terms of this promo and the acting, essentially. So I was a fan of pretty much everything about this.
It's actually a good question you brought up there. Something that, do you think maybe angles are more realistic to you when you're actually there? So maybe people bought it because they were there in person. I'm going to have to test this theory because I'm going to the Norfolk? No, not Norfolk. Some city in Virginia. I can't even remember where it is, but I'm going to that show in November. So I'll see if it plays more realistic when I'm there.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is something to be said about, like, oh, am I seeing Cody retire? Am I here for this moment? And you're just so engrossed in the show that, I would be shouting no if I were there too, So I think there is something to be said for that. But yeah, I'm curious what you think when you do go.
Well, after that event, so Cody off the show for a while, and the next time we see Malakai Black is in a match against Brock Anderson on the August 25th episode of Dynamite, where he pretty much committed an act of manslaughter right in the middle of the ring. The only reason this match goes on more than 12 seconds is because Malakai wanted it to go on for more than 12 seconds. Brock gets one takedown right off the bat, but that lasts for barely 5 seconds before Black is in control, and he gives him a kick like the one he gave to Cody. But he wants this match to end differently. Specifically, he wants Arn Anderson, Brock Anderson's father, to throw in the towel for his boy, and he's just going to let him suffer until he does. Arn, who must not have seen Rocky IV, throws the towel to the ground in defiance, and then Black wastes a few moments telling him to pick it back up, at which point Brock lands a few leg shots during this distraction, but Black lands an exploder followed by a roundhouse kick, and that's all she wrote. Black takes his time to pin Brock, knowing that the guy isn't going to move anytime soon, and gets the win with ease. It's not over yet, however, as Arn rushes to help Brock while Black grabs a chair and starts menacing Arn with it. "Ooh, I got a chair now." Arn is not about to back down and even convinces Black to drop the chair, all the while the ref is doing nothing about this. In fact, the dude just bails, which is both bewildering and utterly hilarious. But to Arn's credit, he does block one kick from Black. Good for him. And then he eats a kick just as his dead son did. So, what did you think about the Brock Anderson match? And did you notice that referee spot? Because the referee's supposed to stop this kind of stuff from happening.
Oh, yeah. Well, usually, bails. I mean, I think usually, at least in other wrestling companies, like, a whole bunch of refs will come out at least or something to try to stop one wrestler from really beating up the other. But in this case, that didn't happen. And personally, I'd be very angry if I were Brock Anderson that no one's coming out to help me. But I mean, this match went pretty much exactly how I thought it would go, which is not a bad thing. It makes sense that Cody, who's been a champion in other places, and Brock Anderson, who is pretty green, is just starting on his own journey. If Cody gets beaten, it makes sense that Brock Anderson gets beaten in a similar way, unless the whole idea is that Brock Anderson has some kind of fluke power over Malakai Black, which is not the story they were telling, which is good because that would be annoying. But yeah, again, they make Malakai look very scary, and not just from his entrance, his weird antler mask.
Yeah, he's got to return that mask back to Triple H at some point, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was his parting gift, I think, when he left WWE.
Well, after the match, Lee Johnson runs down to try and make the save after everyone is already dead, but Black just walks off to the back, and they end up having a match with Lee Johnson on the September 3rd episode of Rampage. To Johnson's credit, he does last longer than anyone else so far, and he even lands a flurry of punches and a drop kick that sends Black out of the ring before following up with a suicide dive. So Black is not invulnerable, and he eats a frog splash from Johnson after getting thrown back into the ring. It all ends up being for naught, however, as Black just needs to land a few kicks to stop Johnson in his tracks, and even gives Johnson a chair at one point to try and even the odds. Johnson is barely in enough shape to hold the darn thing, let alone use it, and so Black finishes him with another roundhouse kick, knocking him out and getting the pin. After the match, Dustin comes down to try and attack Black, so that's the match we're setting up for after the pay-per-view on the Dynamite after that. That's I think Dustin, he cuts a good promo backstage, I think it was a really good idea to pair these two up. Black may come from darkness, but he thrives in darkness, and he's done so for 5 decades, in fact. Though I'd probably skip over the whole 7 thing, and honestly, Black Rain can probably go as well. But there is that kind of similarity between these two characters. You got Dustin, who has done that kind of shtick before, and he has his own type of darkness to him. I kind of wish they really played that up a lot more than they ultimately did before getting to the match. But so far, Black has been great to watch with a theatricality to his performance that few can replicate. And yeah, where do you think Black goes from here? Do you think he's eventually going to get a shot against Kenny?
That's a really good question. I mean, you have to... I mean, he has to keep winning. It sounds obvious, but, you know, they're making him out to be nearly supernatural. So, I don't know. I don't think he goes straight for Kenny or the world title. I think, if anything, he has an incredible feud with Miro. Somebody like Miro for the TNT title. Or maybe he has a few more feuds where he builds up, you know, kind of his power and builds up his notoriety in the company as, oh, you don't want to mess with, you know, Malakai Black, because if you cross him, you know, he's gonna roundhouse kick you after coming out to like a Norwegian metal song or something. But I think,
yeah, what are the lyrics to that song?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of different ways they can go. I could see him also just kind of being someone who, and maybe this is counterproductive in wrestling, but they kind of did it with Bray Wyatt almost at his most successful point, where he's somebody who's almost beyond titles and just kind of loves the sport of it, which almost makes him scarier to me. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways they can go. I think he's just got to destroy the Nightmare family and just move on, I think. And that'll make him quite a vicious opponent moving forward.
Do you think he's going to beat Cody?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think it's quickly.
Nah, it's going to be a little drawn-out match.
Yeah, I think it might be bloody. I think there's going to be a lot of like table spots and, you know, but I think Malakai ends up winning and kind of asserting his dominance over the Nightmare family for sure.
Well, I certainly can't wait to see what Malakai Black does next. But from there, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is Rampage. The first episode aired on August 13th with 3 title matches on it. Between its premiere and the pay-per-view, they have aired 4 episodes in total. But for now, we'll mostly be talking about the first, since it was the premiere episode. And most of the other matches we've seen on Rampage were either already brought up in our discussions earlier, or we'll be bringing back later in the show when we talk about other topics. Now, so far, I think they've been knocking it out of the park. Not every match has been great, not every segment works, but I really like that they just get in and out of there in 1 hour. You need Dynamite to build up the angle so that something like this can work, but it's been really fun so far, and I'm thankful that I can recap a show and get it done in half the time it takes me to do Dynamite. So what do you think about Rampage and its format so far?
I'm loving it. I mean, I look forward to it every week, truly. Probably more than Dynamite. And I don't know if that's just the day it airs. Obviously, it airs on Friday. Generally, people like it better than Wednesdays for unknown reasons. But yeah, I think you nailed it in terms of, it seems like the story is told on Dynamite that kind of helps set up the Rampage matches. And I think that's kind of a formula that's really worked so far. You know, it's kind of like, okay, Dynamite's obviously super fun to watch. There are great matches on Dynamite, but, you know, it seems like Rampage is kind of makes Dynamite stronger, and Dynamite also sets up Rampage perfectly. So I think it does what 2 shows should do for one company. They play off each other, and, you know, watching one doesn't mean that, you know, watching the other, you'll see the same stuff. You might see similar things, but it's kind of a different flavor or some kind of twist. So I'm really digging what they're doing with Rampage so far.
Yeah, they haven't turned it into another darker elevation where you have almost its own separate cast. It's been Dynamite stuff for the most part that has been being played out in Rampage.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're doing a good job of so far giving you things that you haven't seen before. And I think with their, you know, they've got a big roster now, so I think they kind of have the flexibility to do that, and I think they're using it to its full advantage.
And speaking of using it to its full advantage, the first episode that aired on August 13th started with Christian Cage versus Kenny Omega. We'll talk a bit more in detail about the title picture in a bit, but it was a good match and a pretty sizable upset to start the new show with. You know, real people in with something they weren't expecting. We then had Miro facing off against Fuego del Sol. I actually didn't realize that this was technically a title match. I thought it was just for Fuego's contract. So if he did win, he would have been immediately the TNT champion without already being signed to AEW. You know, what if he doesn't sign the contract?
Right.
But that is...
Yeah, then he's going to throw it on the title in the trash on live TV or something. Yeah.
There we go. But it's a hypothetical we will not have to see play out because, he gets a good start. A few tornado DDTs from Fuego just rocks Miro up and down the ring. It's surprising how effective it is. And, for a minute there you think, oh my gosh, did he find his secret weakness? But no. Miro just gives him a Samoan drop and a big kick that knocks him out cold. Miro then locks in the game over, and Fuego taps immediately. So yeah, like I said, it was unexpected for him to get that close to winning one of the titles, but with AEW's particular brand of squash matches, he got a huge pop from the crowd, and they kept it short enough that the novelty of it didn't overstay its welcome. What did you think about Miro and Fuego del Sol just having this weird, quick match here?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's about what you expected, maybe even with a little bonus Fuego del Sol offense. But ultimately, Miro has to win this. I don't think you can build him up the way you're building him up to have, you have to have whoever beats him be as dominant, if not more dominant than he is. So I think it was the right decision having him essentially squash Fuego del Sol, and Fuego del Sol got some offense in at the same time against a great opponent. So it made both of these guys look kind of the level that they're at right now. Not saying Miro can't drop, not saying Fuego del Sol can't rise, but at right now, it makes sense what happened.
And the thing is that if what happened afterwards didn't happen, I'd almost think that Tony Khan was really not interested in getting Fuego del Sol signed. No one else has to go through freaking Miro just to get a contract. But, after the match, Miro relishing in his victory tears up a contract. So Fuego's didn't get his win, so he didn't get the contract. Everyone's sad. But then Tony Khan and Sammy Guevara come out and confirm that despite losing the match, he gets a contract and is now All Elite. A happy ending for all involved, I suppose, and a quick bit of fun, And it works on a shorter show like this. You want something like this, nice and poppy for the 1 hour that you got.
Yeah, and it's it's a feel-good moment where a little bit of reality peeks through, where you get to see, almost a shoot reaction from Fuego del Sol. So it was a really nice moment. I was a big fan of it. And yeah, more wholesome moments in wrestling, please, because it's really nice.
And to end the episode, the main event was Britt Baker versus Red Velvet for the AEW Women's title. Now, whether or not anyone at the company expected this match to be good or not is immaterial, because they were building to Britt's big hometown match since before she got the title belt, and while it's unfortunate that she broke her wrist in the Nyla Rose match, they're going to soldier on and find a way to make it work. The answer, as it turned out to be, was to focus on mat work and submissions rather than big moves and flippy stuff, as it's all about the wrist. Velvet, by the way, gets a pretty raw deal here, as Baker is still the heel in this match, but she's the one getting booed all the time, even though she does the flashy moves like dropkicks and moonsaults. And it almost looked like she might be doing something interesting here, as she refuses to go after the wrist early on in the match, which could genuinely get the crowd to sympathize, but then she goes ahead and starts working it over. So it's basically a babyface acting like a jerk versus a heel who's also a jerk. The work was fine, but I couldn't really get into the match. It was just, I don't know. What did you think about the dynamic here?
I totally agree. It's something we've talked about before, where they're just kind of trying to figure out how to make Britt Baker. It's like there are two approaches. Other companies will be like, no, this isn't how we want you to feel. But AEW seems like they're kind of like, we don't know how to make you not like Britt Baker. And I think that's a common problem with heels becoming too entertaining, because then they get really popular and people start cheering for them. It's a problem Jericho has had to deal with throughout his career, where he's literally made his character the most boring dude on the roster just to not be cheered anymore as a heel. So it's something that's tricky, especially when you're in a wrestler's hometown. So the dynamics were a little odd in this match, but I think for the most part they worked through it. And I'm just a big fan of Britt Baker in general. I think she's great.
It's not a problem that MJF has.
Yeah, well, MJF, MJF.
Do you think he would get cheered in his hometown?
No, I wouldn't cheer MJF if he was from my town, that's for sure. But I think, yeah, MJF does it really well, because he's just extremely, I guess, rude. It would be the term for it.
He may even just bury his own hometown whenever they get to it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm better than you, I'm successful despite you, essentially.
Well, as far as the match itself had a pretty interesting ending. Baker goes for the lockjaw, but guess what? Her cast won't fit in Velvet's mouth. And Velvet escapes only to start, taking apart Baker's cast. They go on for a bit, and then eventually Red Velvet goes for the lockjaw herself, only to discover that Baker has devised a cunning stratagem to overcome her own finisher. She just refuses to open her mouth. I mean, when you say it out loud, it seems kind of obvious, but you can't deny that clenching your jaw and shaking your head like a toddler makes it very hard to lock the move in.
Oh, for sure. And it makes it halfway as effective. And, I actually like that spot a lot. I thought it was really, it was funny, if anything, but I thought it was good strategy by Red Velvet.
Well, with Velvet unable to lock in the move, Baker reverses and tries to put her in the lockjaw, but Velvet grabs the injured arm and bashes it on the mat. Baker is hurt, but not out, as she reverses the move and uses her other hand for the lockjaw, which Velvet taps out to immediately. I guess she didn't catch on to how Baker avoided the move just a minute prior, but regardless, Britt Baker has retained her title and is still AEW Women's Champion, to the utter delight of the Pittsburgh audience. I guess you could call this another happy ending?
Yeah, I guess so. It's so hard to tell with Britt Baker. But I guess, wrestler winning in their hometown, I guess that's a positive, right?
I mean, I guess so. But Baker's not done with Velvet, however, as she starts attacking her after the match, and then Chris Statlander runs in to lay her out. To the boos of the crowd, who I guess wanted to see Baker curb stomp Red Velvet onto the title belt. Okay. But they do ultimately get their wish, as Chris Statlander is attacked by none other than Jamie Hayter, who, as far as I can tell, had 2 matches on Dynamite in 2019 and is back as the extra security that Britt Baker alluded to a few weeks ago. With Statlander out of the picture, Baker drags Velvet over to the belt and stomps her head into it as the first episode Rampage comes to an end. Again, happy ending?
Yeah. Yeah, these endings are a little bit interesting. Jamie Hayter I wasn't super familiar with before this show. But yeah, I guess the heel getting more muscle is good. I don't know.
Yeah, and as far as Rampage and this episode specifically, even with the big titles being fought on the show and with so many things happening, it still kind of felt like a B show. I think the fact that they tried to make it anything but a B show is what made that first episode feel a little bit awkward, and I think the episodes we've gotten since then have found the right balance between light and breezy fun and important can't miss action. I prefer it to have its own identity than trying to ape Dynamite, trying to fit that into an entire hour. But I mean, they've had a few weeks to iron out the kinks, and so far I think it's been a really good addition to the AEW brand, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it makes a lot more sense having it being its own thing with its own kind of tone, not that the tone can't be consistent, but you know what I mean. It's Friday, people just want to relax. I really do think that has to do with it, the day of the week. I mean, I think people want kind of a not less engaging, but you can kind of just shut your brain off and watch good wrestling, right? Whereas Wednesday's the more kind of story dense, kind of
viscerally
episode.
satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they definitely hit their stride in subsequent episodes. But yeah, it's got its own cool little vibe, which I'm really digging, and I really look forward to it every week, honestly.
Now, we definitely want to talk about the title pictures as they evolved in the lead up to All Out, so we'll look at them one by one, starting with the tag titles, which the Young Bucks retained on the August 18th episode of Dynamite against Jurassic Express. It was a great match. Luchasaurus got a lot of pops from the crowd, but the story is that the Elite are constantly interfering in each other's matches, and it is the most blatant here, with Kenny Omega handing the Bucks a chair, and the Good Brothers just being a big nuisance. So much so that Luchasaurus has to focus on wiping all of them out, which leaves Jungle Boy alone in the ring to eat a BTE trigger and hand the win over to the Bucks. Tony Khan is so peeved about this that later in the episode he announces an admittedly very truncated tournament to determine who will challenge the Bucks for the title at All Out, and the match will be a steel cage match to prevent interference. A revelation that the Bucks take very badly, by the way. I like this first match quite a bit. But when I first heard about the steel cage with Tony Schiavone just saying, "I got word from Tony that this is happening," I wasn't really feeling it. What did you think when you first heard that they announced this tournament and steel cage match at the same time?
I thought it made sense just because, when you announce a steel cage, obviously the idea is to keep people out, right? So I think, there's so much interfering on the Elite and on the Bucks' behalf. it makes sense that there would be a stipulation that would keep the Good Brothers out, because I don't see Gallows climbing a cage. I think it made sense. I get that somebody in a position of power who's angry would be like, hey, you know what? We're going to have a tournament to see who the best team is that could beat the Young Bucks, essentially, or at least could face the Young Bucks in a vacuum, essentially, right? So I think it kind of made sense from my perspective, yeah.
A tournament that didn't include FTR, Santana and Ortiz.
Well, wasn't FTR, who was it, Hardwood or the
Wheeler.
other guy? Yeah, he was dealing with an injury, right? Like pretty nasty.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that was when he was dealing with the injury.
He had a really nasty spot that I won't even describe because it's so gross.
Oof, that was rough.
Yeah, that was really tough. But I think he was out of action, so that probably got them out of it. And I think, who was the other team you mentioned?
Santana and Ortiz. They didn't have an injury.
Yeah, Santana and Ortiz. No, they didn't. But I think, I guess just because they were in a program with FTR, it kind of precluded them from being. I get your point, though. I mean, it was a very limited tournament of like 4 teams. So.
Well, whatever it may have thought about the tournament when it was first announced, it proved to be one of the best things during these weeks of television. Private Party and Jurassic Express face off in the first match of the tournament on the August 12th episode of Rampage, and they had a great match as well. It's kind of easy to forget that Private Party came into AEW as the hottest new talent at the company, and they prove it once again here as Jungle Boy and Isaiah Cassie light it up for the first few minutes to the delight of the crowd. There's lots of flips, lots of smooth transitions between moves for a very awesome opening salvo of offense. And even when Cassie tags in Quen, Jungle Boy manages to overcome them with some impressive moves and extraordinary rope work. Private Party eventually start to gain some momentum with Matt Hardy helping on the sidelines, but he's eventually disposed of by Jungle Boy. And when Private Party set up for the gin and juice, Jungle Boy somehow reversed it into a swinging DDT mid-move, which effectively put Cassie out of the match, leaving Quen to fend for himself. He does his best, but few can stand up to a dinosaur one-on-one, and Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy land a Thoracic Express on Mark Quen to get the pin, winning the match and advancing in the tag tournament. I was actually surprised, as I thought that Jurassic Express would be knocked out early since they just got a title shot, but, honestly, with what happened next, it makes sense. And them in the later matches would definitely be more of a marquee match than Private Party. And, I think that Private Party lost something when they joined up with Matt Hardy. And despite their immense skill level, they just don't feel as exciting to watch as they did before they went to the dark side.
Yeah, it would be cool to see them kind of split off from Hardy. And maybe even you can have like a blow-off feud between Hardy and Private Party. But yeah, I think I agree with you. It seemed like they weren't. It seemed like Jurassic Express, maybe they had just gotten shots. Maybe they weren't going to get another shot. But I think they're the hotter hand right now. So I think that's what Tony Khan and AEW went with.
It would help a lot if Private Party would just go back to their old outfits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely.
I don't get the sense that Matt Hardy is a heel in the sense that he wants to control them. Like, he wants their money, he wants their business, but he doesn't seem like a guy who would, like, tell them, no, you must wear the khakis.
Who has uniforms, Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Yeah, it is kind of like, the stable from the Attitude Era, Right to Censor?
Oh, God, who is it? Who's in that?
It was Val Venus was in it at some point. The Godfather was in it at some point. That
was the one, because it was like they took the guy who had like a pimp gimmick and made him into
the Good Father.
The Good Father.
Yeah. So it feels a little bit like that, where it's like, okay, you're part of the stable. This is what you're gonna wear. You're gonna wear. It's just like, all right, come on, So I totally agree with you.
The next match in the tournament was the Lucha Brothers versus Varsity Blondes on the August 25th episode of Dynamite, and it was another great match. The Varsity Blondes are easily one of my favorite up-and-coming groups, so putting them up against the Lucha Brothers was exactly the kind of exposure they needed to continue their upward momentum. Garrison in particular looked great, as his gangly physique belies a very agile and tough customer, one that even Rey Fenix had trouble overcoming at the start of the match. For the most part, though, it's Pillman in the match, as he and Penta spend a lot of time feeling each other out and trading devastating moves back and forth. Goes on for a bit. They tag in Garrison, and Penta ends up getting Garrison on the apron to land a package pile driver. Ugh, that's never fun. But Pillman then lands a springboard kick that sends him to the ground. The victory is short-lived, however, as Phoenix drags Pillman out of the ring, and the Bros give the Blondes super kicks before Phoenix lands a big suicide dive on the two of them. The Blondes try to rally, and Pillman catches Phoenix in a springboard DDT to land a power bomb, which is awesome, but it only gets a 2 count, and a springboard elbow strike from Garrison only gets a 2 count as well. Garrison eats a super kick from Penta that sends him out of the ring, and the Bros throw a super kick party for Pillman, followed by an assisted pile driver to get the pin. So yeah, I like this match a bit. I've heard some people criticize the Varsity Blondes in it, but I thought they did just fine. Garrison, I don't know if he did it this match. I'm trying to remember, but I love when he does that really weird, like, big step running thing through the corners.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, they're a great duo, and I want to see more of them. It looks like we're going to see some more of them with the more recent episodes. But yeah, I thought this was a great match.
I'm all in on the Varsity Blondes. I mean, I think the Lucha Bros have, from the start, they've been a known commodity from people who've watched them before. I really like the Varsity Blondes. I think they've got a great look. I think they're really good wrestlers and exciting wrestlers, and they're young, and they're only going to get better. So, I'm all in on the Varsity Blondes, and I think putting them up against, experienced wrestlers like the Lucha Bros is only going to make them look better and better. So I'm excited to see them go up against, have long programs with teams. I would love to see them go against the veteran team of FTR, for example, and just see what they can do. Kind of the flips versus the fists, right? So I don't know. I'm all in. I really like the Varsity Blondes a lot, and I think this was a really good match.
Heck, just give him give him a title shot against the Lucha Bros. Just do that rematch.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to see that.
So with that victory, the final match of the tournament is on the April 27th episode of Rampage between Jurassic Express and the Lucha Brothers. It'd almost be redundant to say that both of these teams had a fantastic match here, but dang was this match awesome. Jungle Boy and Ray start things off with some great athleticism between the two, with this one Cazador into an arm drag from Jungle Boy that looked like wizardry, and this great spot from Ray, which was, it was admittedly a little convoluted, but still very cool to see. For whatever reason, he's walking on the ropes in Jurassic Express's corner, which I think would be the last place you'd want to be, and sure enough, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus try to shove him off. Of course, Ray Phoenix, being a wizard himself, bounces off the ropes, instead of tumbling over, is right side up again, and lands a kick and a flipping arm drag. Showing off a bit, sure, still awesome anyway. Absolutely.
Yeah, Ray Phoenix is so cool. I mean, obviously, both of them are so cool, Penta and Ray Phoenix. But, I mean, the things that Ray Phoenix especially does is, if I was a wrestler, I'd want to be Ray Phoenix, I think, just so cool. And I love the show-off aspect. And I love Ray Phoenix, and I love this match in general.
Jungle Boy tries to go for the snare trap to end things quickly, but Phoenix rolls out of it, and both guys tag their respective partners in, which gives us Luchasaurus versus Penta for a bit. And I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but Penta's got a strong presence to him that's both very hammy and extremely menacing. Like, his slow walk followed by taking off his glove is over the top, but it also belies a confidence that his opponent can't do anything to stop him, and even when they try, they regret it immediately. Luchasaurus learns it firsthand when he grabs his hand mid-Zero Miedo, and Penta just destroys his left leg with a series of kicks. Luchasaurus recovers pretty quickly, though, and goes for the throat, which prompts Phoenix to come in with a top rope kick that looks like something out of a Jackie Chan movie, and the whole thing descends into chaos at that point. Now, I'm not going to go over every move, because this was amazing from start to finish, and we could talk about every single thing that happened, but we're just going to get through it. There's a spot where Jungle Boy finally locks in the snare trap on Phoenix right in the middle of the ring, and Penta runs in to break up the hold. Okay, this is one spot I was kind of iffy on. Instead of just jumping on him to break it up, Penta hauls back and gives Jungle Boy a freaking goalie kick right into the skull. Now, I watched it again, and Penta does slap the leg, so that terrifying crunching sound was not due to direct contact, but I still couldn't tell you if he actually kicked him or not, and I wouldn't think a swift kick to the temple is in Jungle Boy's best interest.
No. That was a particularly nasty spot, and yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It was just a nasty looking spot, even when you notice the leg slapping, even when you notice, this or that. Getting kicked in the temple kind of is not in anyone's best interest.
The match goes on for a few minutes after that until Luchasaurus tags in and immediately eats a Hurricane Rana, which is enough to keep him down for quite a while, which gives the Lucha Brothers enough time to finish off Jungle Boy with a Canadian Destroyer on the apron. If the goalie kick wasn't enough.
Right.
Luchasaurus is all alone now and eats a bunch of super kicks from both guys, and They do this sort of, I guess, half Canadian destroyer thing, which leads to a pin where both guys were on top of Luchasaurus. Not sure why the ref even bothered counting that, because there's no way that's a legal pin. But Luchasaurus kicks out anyway, and the Lucha Brothers follow up with an assisted pile driver, and that's finally enough to keep them down for the 3 count, where only one of them goes for the pin, and the Lucha Brothers win the match and will face the Young Bucks at the pay-per-view. So yeah, a fantastic end to a pretty amazing tournament that was almost, they had no time to make it work, but they made it work. And It's impressive what they were able to do in just 2 weeks. There was one more match on the September 5th episode of Dynamite with Jurassic Express and Lucha Brothers facing off against the Young Bucks and the Good Brothers in an 8-man tag match. But we'll get to that a bit more when we talk about the world title picture. What did you think about the tournament? They got through it pretty well in the short time they had. But do you think they should have thought this out a little bit longer, maybe made it 8-team tournament instead of a 4-team?
Potentially. I mean, I think they just used how many kind of weeks they had left and just did the math, and they're like, you know what, these are the teams we've got, these are the teams we want in, let's just do it this way. I do think that the teams, obviously we've mentioned FTR and Santana and Ortiz weren't in it. I think there are definitely teams that were left out that could have been a good addition. I honestly just have a feeling they were like, okay, what are we going to do for the tag matches? What are we going to do with the tag title? And then they're like, okay, we could do like a 4-team tournament, right? So I feel like it might have been a little rushed, but I mean, the matches themselves kind of made up for it, I think. I think they bailed out creative there, and there were definitely at least 2 really, really good matches, and I enjoyed all of them.
It was definitely an in case of emergency break glass situation.
Definitely. That's what I think it was the case, yeah.
Well, from there, we're going to go ahead and talk about the women's title, which was, I don't know, I found this to be a mixed bag compared to what we just discussed with the tag titles. We already talked about the Red Velvet match, which set up the Chris Statlander as her challenger for the pay-per-view, as well as bringing Jamie Hayter into the fold. The first match following that one was on the August 25th episode of Dynamite, where Jamie Hayter faced off against Red Velvet. It's mostly just there to establish Hayter as a credible threat and a dangerous ally to Baker. But the most notable thing about this match is the moonsault spot. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know if I do.
Oh, okay. I'm going to refresh your memory, and you're going to go,
yeah, please
do. Red Velvet has Hayter on the ground and does a standing
yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Yep. Oh, my God.
She does a standing moonsault and manages to jump right over her, going splat on the mat with neither one of them moving or knowing what to do. Eventually, Hayter got up and finished off Velvet, but wow, was that a moment. What happened?
I will give props to both of them, because Jamie Hayter didn't really sell it, right?
No.
Didn't sell it as if any part of Red Velvet hit her. And Red Velvet did sell it like, oh my God, I just did a backflip and landed on my own face.
But I mean, even if you're landing on your own face, you shouldn't, she should have reacted in some way. Like, it makes her look silly to knock herself out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I remember being not shocked, but like, wow, that was, did I really just see, that was, wow. So it was, as soon as you started describing it, the light bulb went off.
Well, after the match, the heels start attacking Red Velvet, but Statlander runs down to chase them off, and, unfortunately, that's the last we really see of the feud on Dynamite. The rest of the weeks are spent building up Tay Conte, Anna Jay, Bunny, and Penelope Ford in their feud, and we do get one final match with Chris Statlander on the September 3rd episode of Rampage, where she went up against both Jamie Hayter and Rebel in a handicap match. This is the third person to challenge Baker for the title since she won it, and out of all of them, I think Red Velvet may have had the most interesting build, simply because she talked to Britt. She interacted with her in promos and even took a few shots at her. Sure, Statlander gets the win in a handicap match, but, I mean, one of them is Rebel. You don't exactly get a medal for that. I like Statlander a lot, but this build-up just didn't do it for me. What did you think?
Yeah, a lot of the builds recently have been a little rushed. I think it's almost like someone just took a look at the roster and said, okay, what's the coolest match that we can put on at this point in time? And then they're like, okay, how do we quickly build to this? And this is another example where it's just like, okay, Chris Statlander is great. Let's just throw her in there, and people will just watch the match and it'll be good. So I don't know. It does seem a little rushed, just like the tag team titles. But I don't know. I think I think ultimately it will lead to the better match. So maybe that's all that matters. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't recall, but I remember Chris Statlander did talk at some point. So I don't know why they didn't put her on the mic, because I think that would have been a more effective build than just having her run through a few of her cronies.
For sure. Yeah.
I guess the motivation is to win the title, but it feels like for a proper title match, you got to have something else there. A reason that not only do you want to win, but you want to beat that person. And It's just nothing there. It was just another title match. I don't know what's up with these title matches with Baker, but they just haven't. It feels like they're all placeholders to build up to something, but all we're building up to is the next placeholder.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a great way of putting it. Like they're not sure who's going to beat Britt Baker yet.
But you don't even need to build a story for someone to beat Baker. You just need a better story for who's going to face her.
Yeah, no, for sure. It seems like they're just kind of pushing it to the next person, So I don't know. It's interesting. We'll have to see where things go with Britt Baker, because she's kind of tricky to book right now, because she's almost like a tweener. So I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on it.
Well, the one title that did not have a rushed build-up was the world title picture, which is still held by Kenny Omega. Where we last left off, it looked like Hangman Adam Page was poised to not just challenge for this title at All Out, but to win it. Then, he and the Dark Order lost the 10-man elimination tag match, which threw everything into chaos mere weeks before the pay-per-view. There were two things that more than likely led to this change in storyline: the signing of the new talent, and the fact that Adam Page and his wife were about to have a baby. So to give Kenny Omega some time to work through the big new stars and to give Hangman some time at home, they had him lose his shot at the top spot, and they sent him home on the August 4th episode of Dynamite. Tony Schiavone's interviewing him in the ring when the Elite come out and, mock him for a bit until he takes a swing at Kenny. The Elite then stomp a mud hole into him, and the Dark Order come out to try and make the save. But Adam Page, right before this, had asked the Dark Order to give him some space, and apparently Evil Uno and Stu Grayson took this to mean, do not help me if I'm being murdered. And so they corral the Dark Order to the back while Hangman gets bashed over the head with the title belt. We haven't seen Hangman since, and the Dark Order has been fractured since then. What do you think about the way they got Hangman out of the picture? Do you think this was a good idea at the time, and do you like what they've been doing with the Dark Order since then?
I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I think it makes sense that they had to kind of write Hangman out. I don't know. I just like the Dark Order so much, and I root for them so much that I hate seeing any animosity among them. So I don't know. We'll have to see where things go. I don't want to see them break up. I do want to see this, and I do want to see this relationship with the Hangman continue to evolve. So I don't know. I'm kind of split on it. But maybe it is good storytelling, just in terms of, look, we need to write this person off for a little bit. We need some kind of forward motion for the Dark Order. So I think it does make sense at this point in time. That's ultimately where I land on it.
I will say this about the Dark Order breakup. My favorite Evil Uno is one who's evil. So him getting a little bit of a bite in the more recent episodes, a little bit of a firmer hand with his cronies, I kind of like that. I'm one of the guys who wants to see the Dark Order be a little bit menacing, and so Uno and Grayson corralling them and, telling them what's what. And I think there's a way to make that work where, the rest of the Dark Order respects them for taking the reins. But I don't think that's really where we're going with it. It'd be good if there was, but, that didn't seem to be the direction. I mean, the direction is pretty obvious. We're going to wait until Hangman gets back, and then they're just going to get back together.
Yeah. Right, they'll have some kind of big reuniting or putting aside of differences.
Well, with the Hangman out of action, they needed to put someone else in his place for the title shot, and Christian Cage stepped up to the plate. He cut a solid promo on the August 11th episode of Dynamite, and while he doesn't get an AEW title shot, he did get a shot at Kenny's Impact title on the first episode of Rampage, which we brought up earlier. They had a pretty decent fight back and forth to start the show with, and shock of all shocks, Cage actually beat Kenny. Not clean, of course, as the Bucks tried some shenanigans with a chair, but Christian manages to use it to his advantage, landed a kill switch on Kenny, and this did start a pretty interesting storyline as we were headed to the pay-per-view. Kenny Omega was beaten by Cage in what could arguably be called a fluke, and yet it completely shattered his confidence, which Cage used to his advantage in the next few weeks. On the August 18th episode of Dynamite, he stopped Kenny from interfering in a Young Bucks vs. Jurassic Express match, match. We talked about that earlier. He alleges some sort of conspiracy between him and Don Callis on the August 25th episode of Dynamite, which, I don't know, that was a little bit odd, but it was more just kind of needling Kenny. And anytime they get the least bit physical, Kenny runs away like a scared child. The only thing that's helping him to rebuild his confidence during this time is the rest of the Elite led by Don Callis, who are giving Kenny opportunities to strategically get over Christian at certain points. The Good Brothers basically jump Christian and hold him so that Kenny can get a few easy shots in. Then they put him in a tag match where Brandon Cutler did most of the work and took most of the lumps. And there was the Go Home segment on the September 1st episode of Dynamite. We brought this up briefly when we talked about the tag titles, but that 8-man tag match between the Lucha Bros, Jurassic Express, Good Brothers, and the Young Bucks, good match, but eventually the Young Bucks win. I think they pin Phoenix of all people, and so Kenny Omega and the rest of the Elite come out to celebrate by stomping the baby faces into the ground, and this draws out Christian Cage, who is similarly brought to heel, and it turns out that Omega has the controls to the cage that is above them in preparation for the pay-per-view. He lowers the cage, locking all those baby faces in with the Elite, and continue their assault while other baby faces like Kazarian, Daunte Martin, and Orange Cassidy try to get in. Cage himself was fine in the build-up, but it honestly felt like he was there to fill a spot, and the real story was around Kenny Omega feeling uneasy about facing a challenger for his belt. So in that regard, I thought the build-up to the title match was pretty good, but had circumstances been different, I think that the Hangman program would have been better, and once they get around to it, I have no doubt that it will probably be the better of the two. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess without knowing the full context, I was pretty surprised that it wasn't going to be Hangman Kenny at All Out, right? So after getting over the initial disappointment, I think I really like the Christian Kenny thing. I think they did a good job of adding some kind of personal flavor to it. They threw Don Callis in there, and they did the whole story about Don Callis firing Christian Cage, right? So I think they did a good job of making it a little personal between the two. That being said, of course, we all know what they're building up to. They're building up to Hangman taking the title. So this does feel a little bit filler, but I think they've put on a really good match on Rampage with a pretty surprising ending. So I'm kind of into it. I think Christian can still go.
Oh,
by the way. He's a great wrestler. And he puts on great matches and Kenny's not going to have a bad match. So I don't know. I think even if this feud isn't as personal or as AEW important as Hangman Kenny, I think from a pure wrestling standpoint, you could do worse.
And I mean, say what you will about Don Callis, he is working his butt off for this feud.
Oh, I love Don Callis.
Like not just in the sense that he's a good worker in the sense of like outside of kayfabe. Within kayfabe, he is doing so much to protect Kenny, protect the Bucks, build them up, undermine the opponents. He is working. He is doing his job.
Oh yeah, and the suits he wears. Can we talk about that?
Fantastic suits. Like I wish I had those suits.
Unbelievable. I know. The way he wears a pink suit, it's on another level. Truly.
It is amazing. And there was definitely a lot more that happened while we were out. So before we get to our last big topic, we're just going to go over a few of the smaller stories. Paul Wight and QT Marshall started one of the most one-sided feuds I've ever seen. There's literally no chance for QT to win this, and everyone is was just expecting Paul to run right over the little twerp, which we'll discuss it at when we talk about the pay-per-view. But they did try to inject some drama in this on the August 25th episode of Dynamite. The Gun Club went up against QT in the factory in a trios match, which Paul Wight eventually got involved in. But after clearing out the heels, it's none other than Billy Gunn himself, who takes a chair to Paul's hip and leaves him for dead in the middle of the ring, while Austin and Colton follow behind. What?
Unbelievable. Yeah, I don't know where this came from, to be honest.
The Gun Club as babyfaces are as easy to get over as Paul Wight is. And while I do really like Austin Gunn, I just don't know if him and his brother can pull off convincing heels. Do you think this is going to go anywhere?
No, I don't. I think this is like a little boost forward for what they think could be interesting for the Gun Club. I feel like they're just going to forget about it, though. I don't know. I mean, I can't really see it going anywhere. I mean, where does it go? Do they just do that to more people on the roster?
Who are they even feuding against?
That's
Paul?
That's what I'm wondering. So there's rumors that there's going to be a new trios title.
Okay.
In AEW.
They've been talking about that for a year and a half.
Yeah, but I think in present day, in September, whatever we're recording this, I don't know the date. the company that makes AEW's belts just teased it.
Oh.
So I think it's actively being worked on. So maybe that's one direction they could go with the Gun Club. But I don't know. It just seemed kind of out of the blue for me.
Yeah, I don't know. They got enough people in heel factions to make enough heel trios teams. FTR and Sean Spears.
Right.
You know, the Factory, stuff like that. So I don't think you needed... I don't know. It's kind of like, I feel like I'd be kind of undermining them or condescending to them if I just say, dude, the three of you, just do your act and don't do anything else. But that's kind of what makes them work. You know, it's Billy Gunn and his kids, his super enthusiastic kids, doing some awesome matches every once in a while. They don't come on every week. They're not going for title shots. But every time they show up, I get excited to see them. So, as heels, what do they bring to the table?
That's the thing. I mean, they, not to discredit the kid's gun, but like...
The little pistols.
The pistols. I guess it could give them a chance to explore their personalities and their characters, but at this point, I haven't seen much to indicate that they'll be effective heels. Billy Gunn, I have no doubt, but... I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they do anything with this.
It was a bizarre moment, to be sure.
It truly was.
And so the next thing is that next thing we're going to talk about is Daunte Martin. He had a really great trios match on the August 11th episode of Dynamite. The dude can fly, like very few can. And it was an instant star-making performance. Like, I was always kind of lukewarm on Top Flight. I thought that even though they have the flippy stuff, they seemed a little green, trying to, like, a little programmed. But this match, holy crap, this guy. He just soaring through the air. Like, it was amazing. Now, they haven't really capitalized on it yet, but AEW is not one to rush into things, and I'm interested to see if this is the start of a big push for the guy. Especially with his brother. He's been gone for, a year now?
Right, yeah, he's been gone for a while. I mean, like you said, a star-making performance is the best way to put it. I mean, he is so fun to watch. It just seems like he has just springs in his shoes. Like he's able
using
to just
flubber.
Absolutely, exactly. He's just absolutely able to just explode and leap higher than I've seen in a while. So it's just he's really fun to watch. I'm not sure how old he is, but I think he's pretty young, right?
I think if he's 20, I'd be surprised.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully he can stay healthy. And hopefully they can, I think when you're that young, it's okay if you lose a lot because that's kind of part of the journey. So
he lost in the match, but that didn't matter at all.
Exactly. You just work on your craft, and in the story, it can be that you're kind of, you're catching your lumps, right? So I think that's the best. He just needs to keep putting on these performances. Obviously, easier said than done. He just needs to keep putting on amazing matches, is what I just said. But I think he has a really bright future.
The next thing is the Andrade and Pac feud, which was going to be settled on the pay-per-view, but they had to cancel it due to some sort of travel issue. I don't get it, as Pac had been around the last few weeks, so did he just hop over to England for a few days right before a pay-per-view and just assumed he'd have no trouble getting back, especially with the Delta variant and all sorts of travel restrictions going on right now? To me, it sounded like a cover for something else, but for what I couldn't even guess, they never seemed to allude to anything else. It was probably just travel issues, but what a ridiculous reason for a pay-per-view match to be canceled.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because wasn't the whole travel thing part of the storyline, right?
It was part of the Lucha Brothers. Like, the Lucha Brothers kept being late for the show, and Pac had to just
But they're in that group. Yeah. They're in that group with Pac, right? And Death Triangle?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's such a weird build-up to a match that really doesn't need that much build-up, because these are this is a match you can literally just go, okay, Andrade, Pac, you
have at it.
This match. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Like, I would compare it to Shinsuke Nakamura's first NXT match was against Sami Zayn, and they just announced it one day, and everyone's like, okay, yep, that makes sense.
Perfect.
I'm down. Yeah, you didn't need this silly build-up where Andrade's this big shot who, ruins people's travel plans or whatever. You didn't need that. So I don't know. It honestly took away from them the build up for me for a little bit, but I mean, not enough to ruin the match or anything, but just enough to be like, all right, this is kind of silly. Let's just wrestle.
And finally, just a brief mention of the Miro and Eddie Kingston feud that they threw together in the last week or two before the pay-per-view. Miro called out Eddie for being a heathen or something, and Kingston fired back with some harsh words and a few brawls. The thing is that while a real story would have been better between these two, they have more than enough personality between them to sell you on a match. And besides, if they're going to have every other belt on the pay-per-view, it's probably not a good idea to leave the TNT title off of it, especially since it already has a reputation for being a mid-card belt. So they did what they needed to. It was okay, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eddie Kingston's someone you can get away with having little builds, or at least a little build up, because he's somebody who's just like, okay, I want to fight you, and like that's all you need with Eddie Kingston. I feel like so. And Miro is somebody who's not ever going to back away from a fight, right? So it's like a pretty straightforward setup. And I think if of all the rushed, and this was an incredibly rushed one, of all the rushed like build-ups to matches, I think this one actually made sense. That Eddie was like, okay, you know what? I want your title. I'm going to fight you for it. And Miro was like, yeah, God told me I'm going to beat you or whatever. So, I'm going to. And that's all you need.
Eddie Kingston is a guy who lost clean in a title match and was able to make the next one. He was the next challenger. They had him do a rematch like 2 weeks later and made it amazing. His promo skills are out of the park. I wish they gave him more time. Like, he got a few good lines in there during the build-up, but man, that guy can sell a match.
I biggest surprise of this past year has been Eddie Kingston for me. I mean, just out of nowhere, and obviously there's no such thing as an overnight success. But for me, just going from not knowing who this wrestler is to being like, oh yeah, I'll watch Eddie Kingston in anything. Props to Eddie.
That promo where he and Moxley were nose to nose and just yelling at
oh my god,
one of the best promos I've ever seen.
Incredible. Yeah, those two are so good together in any form.
Fighting, working together. Who cares? Just keep them together.
Being best friends. Yeah, exactly.
And finally, we're going to go ahead and talk about the biggest news that happened in wrestling ever, I guess. The return of CM Punk, starting with his debut on the August 20th episode of Rampage. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, so probably the worst kept secret, or the second worst kept secret if you watched All Out.
Or the best kept secret.
Or the best kept secret, exactly. CM Punk signing with AEW, and I think they made the right decision in terms of having him start the show, because can you imagine the CM Punk chants throughout the show?
Yeah, it sounded like a WWE show.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That would be a problem. So as soon as that static hit, I mean, I was watching with my friend, and I genuinely marked out. And I knew it was coming, and I still marked out. It was a moment that can't be recreated. CM Punk, I think for a lot of people, especially like lapsed wrestling fans, was huge for bringing people back into wrestling with his quote-unquote pipe bombs, right? He was huge for, almost breaking the fourth wall and doing worked shoot promos that sounded so good and so convincing. He really was near rock level on the mic at one point in time. And obviously it's still to be seen whether he will do the same kind of shtick, because right now he's all, oh, I love wrestling and I love you all. And, we'll see where that goes. But at one point in time, CM Punk was just on another level on the mic. And in the ring, too, he would put on great matches. But CM Punk coming back to wrestling it's just a great moment for wrestling. The guy hasn't wrestled in 7 years. Cult of Personality hits. He gets probably one of the biggest pops I've ever heard, ever. And it's in his hometown. The people were crying. I teared up. It was really a special moment. They played it perfectly. It was just simple. It was straightforward. We're gonna play CM Punk. We're gonna play Cult of Personality. He's gonna come out first. People are gonna lose their minds. Let's not build it up anymore. And I just loved every second of it. And the promo itself was great. It seemed like they were like, hey, you can say whatever you want. Just put over Darby Allin and build up that match. And that's what they did.
What I've taken away from Punk in these last few weeks is that he's not what I expected. I always got the sense that Punk was bitter about everything and that giving him a platform would inevitably lead to rants and attacks on WWE. Deserved attacks to be sure, but AEW as a company doesn't need any of that open hostility to the competition. They've been doing just fine on their own, and taking shots at them would only hurt them in the long run. But instead, Punk has spent almost all of his time putting over AEW and the new talent, talking about himself from time to time, throwing in a sideways dig at certain points, sure, but mostly it's been about building up the brand he's on instead of leading the charge against where he was before. And it's been way more endearing to me than I expected, because I thought maybe he'd become off as kind of pretentious. Oh, this guy, he was cool 10 years ago, but what have you done for me lately? That kind of thing. But the fact that he has used his time, he seems genuinely excited about AEW and all that. So whenever he comes on, it's engaging, because he's not there for himself. He's there to make the rest of the show great.
You nailed it. I mean, I think, that MMA guy who's been coming on AEW and just trashing it? Yeah. I think he kind of fills that void, right? You don't need two guys on the show doing that. I think that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, he's just been a breath of fresh air in terms of his positivity, and I think he's had, obviously, in real life, he's had plenty of time to stew and to think about it and to get mad and to kind of go through all the different emotions and to be bitter about wrestling. But he even tweeted, like, man, this wrestling's fun. Like, recently, he was like,
Who knew?
Who knew wrestling could be fun? I mean, that these past few years has just been kind of the running MO for AEW. It's just like, yeah, wrestling should be fun. It shouldn't be like a punishing watch. You should enjoy it. Baby faces should love the crowd, and the crowd loves them, and these dastardly heels should, it's just like going back to basics. And it seems like CM Punk really has bought into what AEW is doing. It seems like, I feel like he's going to be an almost player coach for AEW in terms of like being great on the mic, but also putting on some solid matches. So I'm really excited to see him go up against, someone like Sammy Guevara, someone like MJF. I mean, can you imagine that feud? So it's really exciting. And I think his optimism for someone who's generally in the past has been so jaded or at least cynical is a really nice breath of fresh air in an already, not to get too deep, but in an already pretty cynical world. Yeah. It's nice.
And, he didn't just come out and speak the entire 4 weeks that he was there. He almost did just that. But there was some build up to the pay-per-view match. He was going to face Darby Allin on the pay-per-view. So, and as I said, he kept building up Darby Allin as a great competitor, which is weird because it was like a babyface versus babyface match where it was total mutual respect. How interesting. But in addition to that, there was one segment where 2.0 and Daniel Garcia tried to go after CM Punk. It was on the September 1st episode of Dynamite, and they were swiftly trounced by Punk, with Sting and Darby following right behind. And Punk lands his first go-to-sleep in 7 years on Jeff Parker. Quite an honor to bestow on him.
Yeah, exactly.
This led to a match on the September 3rd episode of Rampage, where Darby swiftly beat Daniel Garcia to build him up for the pay-per-view match. And kind of to bring it back to Garcia once again, because I still love this guy, he proved to be a perfect foil for this match, and it was a really interesting match. Him, Darby Allin, and CM Punk worked together in an interesting way, with one of them not even having to be in the ring. What I liked about... So what made it work is that Punk is watching it from the commentary booth, and it plays out like a roadmap to Darby's strengths as well as his flaws. So throughout the match, Darby is attacking Garcia like this is a grudge match. It just shows that he has a temper and will fight any random schmo with everything he has. He's willing to take big risks and take big bumps, which means he can be baited into bad ideas like the table spot in the match. But his resilience makes it hard to press the advantage for long. As much as he's a daredevil and throws his body around like a ballistic missile, his mat work is strong, and he can easily turn things in his favor if you rely on that alone. All this on full display throughout the match, and is more or less commented on by the announce team. So it works as a learning tool for Punk, and Garcia, he was a big reason why that worked as well as he did. He was the one giving Darby that match where he could show off his strengths and weaknesses in that way. I don't know if anyone else kind of caught that, but that's what made that match so interesting to me, and it's just another reason that Daniel Garcia is swiftly becoming one of my favorite new guys at the company.
No, I think that's a really great observation, because I picked up on almost none of that. I was just like, oh my god, look at CM Punk. So that's a really cool perspective on it, and it makes sense. I mean, CM Punk is in storyline, one of the best competitors, so it makes sense that he'd be eyeing Darby's weaknesses. Meanwhile, Darby is pretty fresh on the scene, so he's eager to show everything off and maybe isn't thinking about kind of keeping his cards close to his chest, right? So that's a really cool interpretation of it that I really like. Dang, I wish I thought of that at the time.
And it's just another thing that CM Punk is bringing to the table. I was pretty cynical about him showing up. Certainly, I was definitely looking more forward to Danielson or even guys like if Bray Wyatt shows up, I was like, oh, he's the one I want to see. But CM Punk, he's been working here for about a month now, and he has done quite a bit to prove why people were excited to see him return. And we'll see what he does next. I'm interested to see what happens now.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the future of wrestling in general just looks quite bright. I think we're in for a treat.
And with that, you know what? I think that's the perfect note. We're gonna go ahead and end it. We're finally caught up. Quite an exhausting list, but let it never be said that we are not thorough. Next time we'll talk about the All Out PPV and all the wonderful and wild things that happen on that show, and hopefully after that we'll return to our usual format. You can still message me on Twitter at @the_superdude92 if you have any questions you'd like to answer on the show. But until next time, keep watching wrestling and keep being phenomenal.